r/AskReddit by Reddit and chill. Business owners of Reddit. What's the most obnoxious reason an employee quit had to be fired over? Pawn shop employee stole $400 from the cash register, then realized that there were video cameras. He had no idea where the security footage was stored, so in order to cover his tracks he set the store on fire. He actually ended up getting pretty badly burned in the process and went to jail right after the hospital. I guess you could say he got fired twice that day. Oh, burn. Smoked him. Had a guy who we hired who showed a lot of potential. Sales. He was a little arrogant and had a good sized ego, but wasn't enough of a problem. He was very good at sales and eventually it went to his head. He started showing up late all the time, leaving early, cutting corners where he could. The final straw came when he showed up late and someone spoke up about it to him. He decided the best choice of words he could yell were, "I make the most sales and I have the biggest dong, so you can all duck off." He was fired on the spot. Customers thought it was pretty funny though. In his defense, if he was making more sales with half the amount of time and meeting quotas, I'd DK if I would have cared, haha. But I would have fired him for saying that, so whatever. Yeah, we do let some things slide when someone's sales are up, but this wasn't something we could excuse, lol. I used to own a bakery and a woman quit because she blamed her yeast infection on a bad batch of yeast I bought from China. I may be a guy, but I don't think that's how it works. Depends on what she's using for a bread box. Oh, bread box with Sandra Bullock? She might have just been trying to get a rise out of you. The company I work is a contractor for a giant corporation and we go to different stores to do work. This new guy we hired seemed normal at first, but it turned out he was a complete ducking idiot. So one day, he goes on site with one of the senior employees to shadow him. This genius thought that because we did work for the giant corporation we could just eat anything off the shelves and from the refrigerators free. Well, employee saw this and was like, "WTF are you doing? You need to pay," and manager comes. This guy then started fighting with the manager, then got in his car after and drove off. Needless to say, his ass was fired the next day. Now he has some food for thought. You leave now. Sounds like me. Seemed normal at first, but it turned out he was a complete ducking idiot. Medical clinic. An employee told a patient he wants to know what she tastes like. Doesn't get much worse. Not many exit interviews start with, "We really hope that was just sexual harassment, but we're gonna inventory the samples just in case." Yep, when sexual harassment is the least concerning explanation. My friend's father is a nurse in the OR. He had a patient who was getting a mass removed from her underarm breast area. Genius nurse takes a medical marker and writes solid, "Call me," with his cell phone number on her breast while she was under anesthesia. I used to manage a store in the mall. One of my employees, I'm pretty sure, was cheating on her husband with a mall security guard. I would come by on my days off and he'd scurry out in a fluster. I never mentioned it, but the guy was coming by all the time to the point that it was keeping her from doing her job. Finally, we had a work meeting and I said in a very non-accusatory way, something like this: "I know it gets slow in here during the week, and I'm guilty of it myself. But from now on I need everyone to keep personal visits to a minimum or during your lunch break." She stands up and starts screaming at me. How dare I accuse her? I'm a beach. She quits. She continued to call me and leave me harassing voicemail for a while too. Jeez, I feel like I would have only acted that way if I were doing quite a bit more than just a personal visit. Damn. Oh, to be the bored employee half listening because it doesn't apply to them. Best meeting ever for them. Mall cops get chicks. Tool and die shop owner here. One of our machinists would go out for lunch and slam back 3-4 beers every day. When I found out, I told him he can't drink beer at lunch. He said it was his time and what he did at lunch was his business, not mine. The next day he came back from lunch smelling like beer. I let him go on the spot. A few years later he showed up in my office asking for his old job back. He said that he was an alcoholic back then and was sorry for his behavior. He was now sober and needed a job. I hired him on the spot and it worked out great for 5 or 6 years. Then he started drinking again and I had to let him go a second time. I have no idea how he is doing now, but I often wonder. He was a great machinist and a nice guy when he was sober. He was a great machinist. Must have been to liquid lunch on the regular and have still 10 fingers. Definitely, I'm not even sure how much 3 beers affected him. But that's not something I could ignore. If he hurt himself and had any alcohol in him, I would have been ducked. The second time he didn't drink at lunch, but was drunk at 7 AM from the night before. It was a shame because he had his shit together for a few years. Then his demons caught up with him. Woman was using company FedEx to deliver purses for her Etsy shop. When you guys found out, you should have ordered a purse to the address of the HR department. Then just watch her panic in confusion. Panic at the FedEx. Ah yes, I love their song I make deliveries not tragedies. I worked for a boutique hotel, you know. Small, cute, expensive AF, as an ops manager. Basically, unless the area manager had to come in, I was the law. I get a frantic call on my downtime from an employee claiming our overnight guy tried to assault him. I have a sigh, as the guy freaking out is notorious for being a drama queen. I load up the security camera on my home PC, go to the time frame, and holy shit, our night guy legitimately lunged at his co-worker and tried to strangle him. Luckily a desk was between them, and that gave the victim time to bolt. Instantly felt like a dong for doubting him. Well, this is when I call in the area manager. We show up at the ass crack of dawn and speak with the dude who made the attack, and he claims he didn't do it. We show him the video, and I shit you not, he responds with, "I don't recall the events of that evening." We fired him on the spot. What started the fight, you ask? Well, the victim had done extra work to make the attacker's shift easier. The attacker felt like this was an insult to his work ethic. Oh, and I got multiple reference requests from similar hotels asking for a good reference. I simply said I wasn't able to provide a positive reference, as legally that was all I could say. Employee does a nice thing. Overnight guy, you deserve to die now. There can only be one overnight guy. I've had a co-worker get insulted that I did extra work. It was snowing and blowing outside and I arrived about an hour early. Figured I'd do our outdoor chores so she didn't have to. When she arrived, she threw a duffel bag into the wall and cussed me out, then demanded to do all the next day's chores by herself. I took her up on that. My wife and I started a small software company 20 years ago. She's the manager and does sales and HR. I do the programming. Anyway, we hired a programmer one time, and the first day on the job I spent the whole morning with him going over our development philosophy, how we do source control etc, and then showed him an overview of our applications and how we build them. Along the way he was highly critical, pointing out what he considered flaws in everything. After lunch he goes back in to see my wife. He obviously didn't know we were married. We don't share surname, and at work we keep pretty much to ourselves. He says to my wife, "You know how to fix this company? You need to fire that other guy." We still laugh about that one. What do you need 2 mechanics for? I really don't. One of our crews was on a job and the client turned up and started losing her shit over something they'd done wrong. 10 minutes later a guy turns up, and as he is wearing high-vis they assume he is also working on the project. We had this one guy who was as dumb as a bag of rocks. He goes up to the newcomer and starts talking about this fat effing BTCH who needs a good slap, and how dare she complain when she obviously doesn't know shit about construction. Turns out the newcomer was that BH's husband. Oh shit, they broke rule number 1. If you don't know who they are, assume they can fire you until proven otherwise. Or don't be a ducking a-hole to anyone. We hired someone to do video photo media work. After a certain point he felt it was selling out and didn't want to do media commercially. He wanted to do business stuff. We asked him which role he would like. If he picked his role, we tried out. If he didn't, he would quit. He decided to quit. He couldn't come up with a role. What kind of work is it? Something about the way you worded that has caught my interest. Outdoors tourism. That's selling out. To this guy? For duck's sakes. 9 companies out of 10 have a crazy boring position in the supply chain or do mundane work that needs to be done. I would kill for my same office job, but in something like outdoors tourism. It's literally the best of both worlds. This guy is going to have regrets. Makes you wonder how people like that have gotten as far as they have in life. He was a finisher. Closer. Salesperson was the keyword. Salespeople, good, even mediocre ones can usually find someplace that appreciates them in spite of their other completely weird, nutty, totally unacceptable behaviors. Salespeople have the tendency to get immediate tangible results. A guy just sold 100k widgets, I just made you $1 million. They also tend to be both likable and pushy. About a year ago, I hired a guy who was down on his luck, went against my best judgment. Due to the nature of my business, I usually don't hire people that fit his profile. Out of shape, poor hygiene, etc. It wasn't long before I started hearing complaints from female employees and clients. Turns out that he would often attempt to flirt with women, and when turned down, he would lose his mind and call them terrible names and insults. I don't tolerate that shit, so I gave him a very stern warning. The very next day, I found one of my sweetest female employees visibly upset. Upon inquiring, she said that the dipshit had followed her home yesterday to make sure she got home safely, then showed up this morning to escort her to the office. She was genuinely scared. I called him into my office and told him to scram. He threatened to file a complaint with the Department of Labor for discrimination against men who have an innate need to protect women. Didn't matter. Told him to beat it, and now I'm fighting the stupid claim with the doll. Once you're done that with that hearing and easily win, I'd be tempted, if I were you, to take him to small claims court to offset any costs you can rationalize from this fiasco. I wonder if dude's crazy enough to be the next workplace shooter though, because then it might not even be worth it. Edit. I am ducking blown away as to how this turned into a gun and gun laws argument. Y'all got so triggered by the words shooter and gun and should honestly take a long, hard look at yourselves and why you start useless arguments on the internet. I understand, given the current situation in the world, especially the United States, why that question may arise in someone's mind. But I refuse to be bullied by petty, small-minded people who see themselves as somehow better than the rest of the world. I used to do some consulting work and hired a woman to help out, mostly clerical stuff and whatnot. I flew down to St. Thomas for a meeting and got a call from Sonatrol at 1:30 p.m. She had keys to my building but didn't know about the alarm. Basically, she and her boyfriend brought another couple down to have a foursome in one of my offices I had converted to a bedroom where I could crash if I worked late. So I called her. She answered mid-coitus and acted normal, albeit a little tipsy. I talked about a few mundane details I needed to relay to her anyways and then mentioned to make sure she only was ever at the office between 700 am and 700 pm since there was a silent alarm that would call me with audio of activities in the building. When I got back in town, her keys were sitting on my desk. I guess she ducked up and down, probably sideways, too. I fired a guy because he said he couldn't come to work because it was raining and he had just washed his car the day before. I had an employee call off because it was raining and his car didn't have windshield wipers. That was a brand new excuse for me, so I'll let him have the day off. Once. You can't drive without them. It's basically a death sentence if you try, and it's actually raining, it's something. Obviously depends on the situation. If it makes you feel any better, I legit had this problem once before and the boss was trying to call bluff, but there was nothing I could do. I couldn't see with the rain coming down. A friend and I had a version of this problem while on a road trip. His windshield wipers just quit and we had to get home before the next morning because we had classes. They make rain X or something that repels water, but you still have to drive to get it. Had a guy on a location fake an injury. Now mind you, he did injure himself severely accidentally, but that wasn't his plan. His plan had been to fake a minor injury and get put on workers' comp. The problem was he screwed up how to do it and ended up hurting himself severely. You ask, how did you know he was trying to fake injure himself? Well, that's very easy to explain. We had a 20-minute tape of him hiding behind one of the trucks on the worksite practicing his fall. Then a written confession from friends saying that he'd been planning it since the day we hired him. Was his plan to only get a little run over? His plan was to twist his ankle in one of the small gopher size holes on the location. Instead he tripped over a clearly marked line of pipe and impaled himself on another piece of pipe. It apparently screwed up his intestines pretty badly. Fake a minor injury, impaled himself. Yep, Bill's always been an overachiever. Not my business but my dad's. He hired predominantly people with criminal records and literally all they had to do was inspect rental cars for damage as the cars left the lot and keep their noses clean. You could do pretty much anything you wanted on your downtime with no complaints from my dad as long as he didn't get any complaints from the owners of the car lot. One day one of the supervisors for the car lot I worked for walks out and asks me for my dad's number. The supervisor had caught a guy stealing gas from the property. He even had security camera footage of it happening. Dude was instantly fired. Good on your dad for hiring people who struggle getting jobs. That's exactly why he did it, too. One of his best friends of 30 plus years and his brother were both ex-cons and struggled to get jobs. Plus with the exception of this guy they were all super reliable and gave him no problems. Everyone with no record, me being probably the only exception, gave him a ton of problems and weren't as reliable. Worked for him well until the business went under many years later. I guess if you finally find a job, you don't want to duck it up. Not a business owner, but at a previous job we had issues with food being stolen from the break room fridge. The company made a big stink about it and it kept happening, so they very obviously installed security cameras in the break room. Like big ducking cameras in plain sight, pointing at the fridge, with our bosses being very direct about there is the camera. You really want to lose your job over eating someone's sandwich? Few days later guy gets fired for stealing food, literally on camera just grabbing people's lunch out of the fridge and eating it. Good, there's a ducking break room thief at every job site in America and I think they should be held down and have gallons of milk of magnesia poured down their throats. Duckers, edit, OMG gold. Who'd have thought I'd get gold for such a shitty comment? Thank you. At that point I'd be hard pressed to figure out why he felt his job was worth less than one sandwich. Hot dogs? Don't own a business but work on employee claims and lawsuits. I've told this story on here before. A guy filed a discrimination complaint against the company after he got fired for stealing hot dogs from the refrigerator. This warehouse, big company, this was not at my location, kept a stock of hot dogs for employee appreciation picnics, usually weekly cookouts. No one knew why they were disappearing, so announcements were made and all employees were asked to not eat the hot dogs, and if they wanted some they could ask but couldn't have several packs. That didn't work, so warnings were announced. Finally a camera was installed near the refrigerator and he got caught red-handed. He was just practically inhaling the hot dogs directly from refrigerator by the packs. After he was fired, he filed a discrimination claim on the basis of disability due to his weight. I sent the response with a video of him eating the hot dogs. Also, he couldn't prove his weight was a disability under the ADA and weight is not a protected class. We won that claim. The picture of an obese man on his knees as if in prayer in front of a fridge just eating raw hot dogs by the pack is something I never thought I would be forced to face. It's been about 15 years since I've seen the video and it still grossed me out. Even if it was covered by the ADA only says that business have to make reasonable accommodations for disabilities, like good chairs or standing desks for people with back problems, or specialized equipment for people in wheelchairs. Free range of the fridge. Suck down as many hot dogs as you want doesn't fall under that, I think. So LOL at this dude for being entitled and making the ADA paperwork just that much more of a pain in the ass for the rest of us who genuinely need it. Employee had corporate card, charged a vacation, purse, fossil watch, takeout, along with overall being miserable to work with. Had laptop stolen within weeks of joining. Fired her, and a few days later a watch catalog from Fossil showed up at the office with her name on it. Have active court cases for all the theft. She threw everything away for a Fossil? Fossil? Jeez. The one that instantly jumps to mind was the woman who was fired day 2 of the call center training course because she wouldn't stop touching herself. Not sure how she got through HR screening. This was for a wireless phone company too, not a chat line or anything. Edit. Since people requested details, it was really somewhat sad. She was late 30s, early 40s, and I don't think this was an employment scam or anything of the like, and more likely just a mental compulsion or drugs. It was really not that subtle, but done under a shawl scarf thing draped over her lap. Politely and quietly asked to stop by the trainer, then stopped momentarily but started up again 15-20 minutes later. Oblig, I'm not the business owner as well. It was a multinational corp, but really they don't get the best stories anyway. I regret nothing. Thank you for calling Verizon. You like that, you ducking retard? You don't even need to do that if you legit work at a phone sex chat line. There's this thing called acting. I like this one because it's so out of left field. People do occasionally see thieves and liars at their jobs. Compulsive masturbators? Not so common. Back when I had my translation business, I hired a guy to seek out contracts for me. I'd pay him 20% finder's fee. Instead of sending the finished project to a client, he accidentally sent naked pictures of himself. I learned of it when my client forwarded me the mail half an hour later, including the multiple glorious cockashots. I'd love to hear an explanation for this. I had a subcontractor on a job for my company try and convince the client that they should dump me and go with their business and they would undercut me by 10%. Learned this from the client, who asked me to find another person to service our contract. My parents got a quote on some plumbing work they needed once from a chain company, Roto-Rooter, I think, and they quoted some enormous fee in the high thousands. Then, individually while one is talking to my mother and the other guy is talking to my father on a different area of the property, they each mentioned they run their own side business and could do the work for way less. I still wonder if they knew they were trying to undercut each other as well as trying to undercut their employer. My parents went with someone else. A guy threw a hammer at another guy for changing the radio station. Getting hammered at work, SMH. My dad owned his own business working as a color corrector / editor. He had this one employee who had been there since day one and ended up becoming similar to an assistant manager. My dad owned that company for 10+ years and, just recently, he had to fire the assistant manager because apparently he was telling employees and customers that my dad hates gays, people who aren't white, his kids, his whole family, that he's a terrible person, etc. Basically driving all business away, pushing my dad's company towards bankruptcy. Turns out he was a narcissistic sociopath. My dad's just sad his employees never trusted him enough to tell him about what this guy would say to them. I wonder if the guy saying those things could be liable for slander / libel. He caused intentional damage to your dad's business reputation in his statements. Maybe that's worth looking into. Ducking like and subscribe.